Hello everybody, we're back with more Necromancer feedback, this time for the Trag'oul's set on build 45704. And you'll see in the background I'm running a very similar build to the last time we did this with the Trag'oul set, which is using the Skeletal Mage with the Life Support rune, which essentially is the rune that costs health. I'll go into the build in full detail in a moment, but I think it's important to first go over the change to the Trag'oul set. Everything remains the same except for the 6-piece, which used to give you a stack every time you used a life spending attack, which then would increase the amount of life that the next life spending attack costs, but also increase the damage, and that would stack essentially up to 50. And it was a really cool concept. However, it wasn't hardcore friendly, and it gave you a very interesting build, or I guess playstyle that had a very high skill ceiling and was not easy to play. And I don't mean like easy to play as in like what kind of skill you actually have to put into it. I mean like it was really cool and it was a cool concept, but it just wasn't a fun play style. The build itself was fun to play and I really had a lot of fun playing it, but the idea of managing those stacks and those stacks costing more health, and then just it getting to this point where you're like full health, no health, full health, no health. It just it wasn't a good gameplay experience. I think that's the best way to put it. With the new six-piece bonus, it is your life spending attacks deal 3,300% increased damage, but cost twice as much life, and your healing from skills is increased by 100%. So at the end of all these changes, what we see is that the overall damage of Trag'oul's is nerfed, because if you got to 50 stacks on that set, it was ridiculous, but it is a lot more consistent. There is less ramp. The ramp was awful before, because if you died, you had to re-ramp, and that was one of the worst experiences of that set. And with this new one, it is more consistent across the board, so I would say it is a net damage decrease. That said, it is way easier to play, and it is which in turn makes it a lot more fun to play. But I think we also have to answer the question of why am I running the build that I'm running in the background, and it really just boils down to it's the best one that I have found with this set. Because Blood Nova, which is the Death Nova rune, which costs blood and is supposed to deal a ton of damage, doesn't actually do much at all. If anything, it just doesn't do enough damage to justify using it, though it is an AoE ability. And then on top of that, most of the other blood skills, they don't do enough damage either to justify the cost in the health. So what I found is that using the Skeletal Mage with the Blood Rune is I can spend that health, I'm investing that health into something that's going to continue to do a lot of damage. And it does indeed do a lot of damage. So let's go over the build real quick. I'm using Siphon Blood with the Bloodsucker. Essentially, I'm just picking up health globes with the Bloodsucker rune. I'm healing myself with Siphon Blood, which heals up the health that I'm using to cast Skeletal Mage. The Skeletal Mage is getting the bonus because it is a life-spending ability. On top of that, I'm using the same stuff I was using before. Devour with Devouring Aura, though I don't think that that's needed. It's just what I'm using. I could easily change that out for many things. Blood Rush, just because you get all the runes for it, and it is actually very useful. You can use it to heal if you Blood Rush through targets, plus you get the armor bonus when you Blood Rush, and there's just many bonuses to using Blood Rush. I'm using Bone Armor with a Dislocation. That's the stun rune, which is the poison one, so it's not the blood attack one, mostly because my life per second is pretty bad anyways, and the blood rune just increases your life per second by, it would essentially be 100%, which is not bad. It's also just not the best. So it's a nice little bit of damage reduction, and I can stun targets. And then finally, I'm using command skeletons with Dark Mending. Now, this is a new addition to the build. We'll go over that in a second, but they're essentially just healing me when they hit, which is, it's nice, but it's definitely not enough. So I've considered switching these out for a different rune that might be a bit better. I've experimented with each one. They're all pretty, across the board pretty average, except for this one. It just doesn't provide enough healing, but that's what I'm running in the background. As far as in my cube, I am running this Scythe of the Cycle, which is the secondary skills do 300% additional damage while bone armor is active, which is affecting Skeletal Mage because that is a secondary skill. So that's where a lot of that damage is coming from. Using Tasker and Theo because attack speed of pets is really good. And then using Lornell's Sunstone in the cube, which is the damage reduction increased by essentially 1% for every 1% life I'm missing, which is crazy good, especially when you have a huge amount of HP on this build, which you do. In fact, I'm like up at 2 million on average when I have all 100 health stacks from the set, which is crazy because that means when I am at, you know, let's say I have really low HP, the effective HP of what I have is still significantly more than what most people would have. So getting that damage reduction from that ring is really, really good. I would say that you could use purple gems in your gear to get more HP, but it's actually not needed as much as it was with the old set, with the old 6 set bonus. So I am using the first bit of footage, I am using purple gems just because I copied my build over using the armory, but I do end up switching to using int gems just because they're better with a cooldown reduction in the helm, just so I can get bone armor up a bit more often. There's more to that in a minute, but the most important thing that I've changed with this build, which is why I'm using command skeletons, is I'm using the weapon set. So Jesseth, the arm set. So it's a scythe and a shield, and they changed it. It is now, it's got 2 effects. When your command skeletons dies, or when the target of your command skeletons dies, the skeletons are automatically changed to a new nearby target. That means that you don't have to keep micromanaging command skeletons. They're just going to sit there and keep attacking things. So you hit it once, and as long as there's enemies nearby, that's going to keep chaining, which is a huge quality of life change, but it is a pretty big damage boost because of the second bit on this, which is when your skeletons are commanded to attack a target, all of your minions deal 400% increased damage. So my skeletal mages are getting their damage bonus from the set. They're getting the damage bonus from this weapon set. Then they're also getting the damage bonus from having Scythe of the Cycle. So it is this cool version of this build, which is using these pets to do my damage. But it does have a few drawbacks. The most notable one being that I do not have any AoE damage. So I'm relying on my pets to do all this like single target damage. It means that I do kill rare packs really quick, and Rift Guardians melt when I get the right Rift Guardian. Unless I get the stupid Bat Rift Guardian, which is like the worst one. I don't understand why it is so bad. You'll see in the footage. I don't understand it. Then I'll get another Rift Guardian and I'll just blast through him like he's nothing. It's frustrating that the fact that one Rift Guardian can completely change a run. But I think that using this pet build has been really strong, and it is significantly stronger than all of the other blood spending attacks, which says a lot about the other blood spending attacks, or it says a lot about the fact that the set probably just needs a bit more damage on it. I think the gameplay of the set feels a lot better than it used to. I did really enjoy my previous build, running all the stacks and doing crazy damage with the skeletal mages before, but that it wasn't a good gameplay experience. This is a much better gameplay experience, but I'm doing less damage. So I'm in a lower level rift, and I'm barely completing them, but that's not to say that's not easy to fix. You just add more % damage on stuff. The damage reduction that I'm gaining is pretty significant, so I don't feel like I'm being bottlenecked there. I think where my bottleneck is in the amount of damage that I can do to things and how quickly I can clear a screen because I'm not running any AoE. To fix this, I have tried running Iron Rose, which was recently buffed. It's a phylactery that says attacking with Siphon Blood now has a 50% chance to cast a free Blood Nova. Tried that. It is awful. And the reason why is because it doesn't do enough damage. Just a Blood Nova feels so weak in comparison to everything else. Whether that is because it's not gaining the bonus of the Trag'ouls, I don't know. But it literally does absolutely nothing to the health on screen for enemies. So having to run Iron Rose instead of Scythe of the Cycle, it just completely destroys your damage with this build, which is unfortunate. Now, let's say I take Jessith, which is the worst name ever because it is so bad to say. It is literally Jesseth. Jesseth. I don't know. It is a terrible set to take off for this build because you're running into the issue of now your pets don't do enough damage. So what do you put in return? Well, you can try, and this is going through my entire thought process and all of the variations of this build I've changed, so bear with me. I've tried switching out this set bonus on these weapons and trying the Blood Tie Blade, which is Death Nova, deals 30% increased damage for every enemy within 15 yards. Using that with Iron Rose, still not good enough. Still does literally no damage. I don't understand why. And even with that, and running potentially, right, so you use the Blood Tie Blade, which is a two-handed, which means you have to use Iron Rose, in the cube. Trying that and then doing that kind of damage doesn't do anything. Switching Iron Rose out for the Scythe of the Cycle does nothing with the Bone Armor rune and everything. It just, for whatever reason, Death Nova does nothing, and it's really frustrating. So I have tried using Bone Spear with the Blood rune. That also does nothing. Now you might say, well, Zen, you're using Devour, and you said you don't need to use Devour necessarily, so why don't you change that out for Simulacrum? Because the reason I'm not doing that is because that also doesn't work. In fact, the only reason I'm not running it, it's not that it's a bad ability, the only reason I'm not running it in the build in the background and getting the bonuses on Skeletal Mages from that is because it does nothing to Skeletal Mage. You can sit there and cast Skeletal Mage all day, Simulacrum's not going to duplicate it for whatever reason. So it's a useless ability for this build. I tried using it with the Blood Nova, with the Blood Rune on Bone Spear. Nothing. Just does nothing. It is a useless ability for those builds because those builds, the abilities themselves aren't doing anything. So duplicating it, sure, you're technically doubling the damage of what it's doing, but if it's doing 0 damage and you're doubling it by well, if you're doubling 0, then you're still doing 0 damage. So Simulacrum feels like it's doing nothing as well, and that is even trying it with the neck piece, which doubles the duration of Simulacrum, which is a really cool ability, don't get me wrong, it's just it's not doing anything for this set. So I feel like the set has been improved, the gameplay has been improved, but it's still not quite there. It's headed in the right direction, but the damage isn't there yet, and the risk and reward factor doesn't feel like it's there either anymore. Before, the old set felt like it had a risk and reward. You were risking playing the build because you were using a lot of your HP, but doing a ton of damage. And now it just feels like you're using some of your HP and you're gaining not really a huge damage bonus out of it. So either the set is just not doing enough damage, the percent damage on it isn't enough, or something else needs to change. I don't like giving direct feedback like that. I don't like giving suggestions on how to do things because at the end of the day, we don't know what the intentions of the devs are with certain things, right? Let me get this straight. They are not sitting here being like, aha, we're only going to have the Necromancer do Greater Rift 70 because then that way everybody will buy the Necromancer and spend whatever amount of money it is. It's not, I mean, let's be honest, it's not going to be over like $30. Let's say it's $15, which I think would be a fine amount, or $20, which would also be a fine amount, but that's, you know, a personal preference. And they're going to be suckers because they're going to buy this thing and it's only going to be able to do Greater Rift 70 and aha, we got them. How does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense. Like, if you believe that's what Blizzard is doing, then you are a crazy person because they want the Necromancer to be the best that it can be because they play Diablo 2 and they really enjoy having, you know, the Necromancer as a class in the game, and they want to have the best product out there. They are selling the Necromancer because it takes a lot of work to put it in. So at no point are the devs going, this Greater Rift 70 is exactly what we want the Necromancer to do. They want it to have the best potential lifespan of a character in Diablo, which means that it needs to be able to push along with the other classes and feel cool and unique as it does it. So I don't like giving direct feedback on how to improve certain things because it doesn't change like their intentions. Their intentions of this build, I do not know. Maybe they have a really cool item coming down the line or a really cool change to certain items coming down the line that will completely drastically change this. So for me just to say, well, maybe you should do this, 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 and this to this set, it's not helpful because I don't have all of the information. So the best feedback I can give is how I feel while playing the set, and then we can figure out whether or not that aligns with their intentions for the set. So I feel like the set is heading in the right direction. It is much easier to play. I really enjoy it now. I did really enjoy it before, though there were points where I didn't. When you died, it was way too punishing. With this new set, it's really cool, but I don't feel like I can use any of the blood runes on any ability except for Skeletal Mage, because that's the only one doing things. And even then, that's with using a weapon set that isn't necessarily intended to go with Trag'ouls, but is still really cool. And when you take into account the other weapons, there is a weapon that literally has the name Trag'ouls in it, which is the curse weapon. Curses things, you do extra damage to things that are cursed. It is more of a melee mancer kind of idea in mind. While I feel like that could work with this set, the problem is it feels like Siphon Blood should be the generator and not Scythe, or not Grim Scythe. So it feels like there is a disconnect on what is the intention of certain items to go with certain sets, though this set is made to have a lot of open-ended stuff. That said, I only feel like I can use Skeletal Mage. Another problem that you run into here is if you just buff the Trag'oul 6-piece bonus to make sure that, okay, well now Blood Nova is going to do enough damage because the 6-piece bonus is better. That doesn't fix anything. That just means that it's also buffing this build I'm running, which kind of just gives you the exact same problem. This build is a better build. Why would you use any of the other skills? Because they don't do anything. So the problem that also relies on that, or is in line with that, is that when you use Blood Nova leveling up, if you just buffed the Blood Nova damage, then Blood Nova becomes too powerful as a base skill, and it ruins the leveling up experience. Or it ruins the experience with other sets because, you know, say an open-ended set like Saints might be able to now use that rune, and then that completely changes everything that has to do with the Saint set. So you're running into an issue of how do you increase the damage of these other skills without messing with everything else, because these skills do touch other parts of the game, right? And you can't just increase the 6-piece bonus because that means that this build that I'm running is now better. So what you could do, and this is not something that I'm suggesting, but this is something that could be along the same line of thought, is now you nerf Skeletal Mage, which means that it is not as good as running Blood Nova, but then you're running into the exact same issue of it's all kind of across the board, still not good enough. So where do you increase the damage? Where do you add an item or change an item to make sure that Blood Nova is doing more damage? I mean, essentially, we see that they are clever with adding certain things, such as the Trag'oul's weapon. It now says, it used to just be like the Curse Scythe rune on Grim Scythe now has a 100% chance to apply a curse, and that was it. But now it also has an additional, and you do 200% increased damage to cursed enemies. That's really cool. I really like that. That's a cool flavor. But where do you add that on different abilities? Maybe Iron Rose is attacking with Siphon Blood, has a 50% chance to cast free Blood Nova, and Blood Nova now does 800% increased damage, or something like that. Which would be interesting, and it would mean that you actually would not use Scythe of the Cycle, because if you were also using the Blood Tide Blade, which increases Death Nova damage per enemy around you, then that essentially is the item you're wearing, is the Blood Tide Blade, and then you're using Iron Rose in the cube, or you switch those out, you use Blood Tide Blade in the cube, you use Iron Rose on your character, which is a phylactery, which means that you then probably use the pick, which increases or makes Siphon Blood drain from 2 additional targets, And if you changed it so that drawing from 2 additional targets means that you're actually casting it 3 times, which means on each of those 3 times you have a 50% chance to cast Blood Nova. See, now we're getting somewhere with that, right? I think that there are like little tiny clever things that you can do to mean that all of these other skills that cost blood are actually able to be used with this build and are not necessarily better than Skeletal Mage, but are on par with it so that you have all these options. And I feel like that's where this is supposed to be going. It's just I don't feel like that's where it is now. So as it stands, Trag'oul plays better, is much better in general, but the damage isn't quite there yet for most of the different skills that cost blood. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how this changes over the course of the beta, because it's going to be a fun, I really enjoy it. I think it's going to be a fun build when the game, or when Necromancer is released. And in its current state, it is way more hardcore friendly, which is always a plus. That said, it's just not good enough yet. And I think that that is our big takeaway from this patch, is that Trag'ouls could use some work. There are other builds that are way better, and for the most part, I want to see a little bit of love on this set because it is unique and because it is a lot of fun to play, though I could see how it is quite hard to balance properly. With that being said, we shall see you guys next time.